the type of brand it is. If it's a modern brand versus a classic brand, has a big influence on kind of which programs it performs well. We want people to know that and know why we're recommending those things.
That is Jonathan Stern, a former partner at Bain and the CEO and founder of SnapStrat. SnapStrat builds tools for its clients to bring prescriptive analytics and machine learning to the tasks of regularly recurring strategic decisions. In this episode, Jonathan shares a case example of SnapStrat's work with a top beauty products retailer, helping them use analytics to determine which free samples to give out. To learn more about Jonathan and the work at his firm, visit his firm's website, snapstrat.com. And I hope you'll consider signing up for the weekly Unleashed email. I'll send you the transcript of every episode, book recommendations, and consulting tips. Visit umbrex.com and click on Unleashed. Hello, Jonathan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So, Jonathan, after 25 years as a consultant, you have now a software startup. Tell me about the switch and about what you're doing.
Well, as I went through my consulting career, I realized that increasingly the 27-tab Excel model and PowerPoint deck we were handing off, and maybe it had become a Tableau front end. It wasn't sustainable for our clients over the long term as they tried to take the strategy recommendations and execute them. And the reason that had changed was because this pace of business change had increased so dramatically. And so that the half-life of that spreadsheet or that PowerPoint deck was getting shorter and shorter. And I recognized that there was a opportunity to fill that gap and bring data science and machine learning, scenario modeling, and so forth to the category of recurring strategic decisions that actually link a strategy with execution. For example, a location strategy might define a set of countries you're going to expand to. The value of that strategy is realized on a quarter-by-quarter basis when you decide which locations you're going to open next and how much you're going to invest in them and so forth. It's that second class of decision, not the initial strategy, but the set of decisions that link the strategy to actually getting the value from that strategy. That is where SnapStrat is focused.
So give me some examples of those.
Yeah, there's two primary use cases that we're focused on, though it's applicable across a broad set. One is marketing allocation. When you think and look at the products in the market that help CMOs allocate marketing spend, they tend to be focused way down towards the customer. Which channel should I put this campaign on? Should I put it on? How much should I put on radio versus the internet versus social or what have you? That's a valuable product, but the strategy for a marketer is thinking through which product should I allocate my marketing spend to, or which customer segments, or which geographies. We think about that problem at that level, the strategic level. And another example is something that all organizations do, which is strategic planning. In the case of strategic planning, you're trying to allocate a scarce set of resources, capital, and expense dollars to a set of discretionary projects. They may be IT projects, they may be other kinds of projects. That process is highly strategic, and most of the tools that handle program management are focused not on making the decision of how you allocate those scarce resources, but in fact, kind of tracking those resources after they've been allocated. So we focus on the front end of those kinds of allocation and optimization decisions. So those are a couple of examples we're focused on, and there's a wealth more in different functions and industries.
Great. Let's take that marketing allocation example. Maybe you could walk me through a sanitized case example or a more sort of generalized case example of that. So I'm a chief marketing officer, let's say, and we're discussing, give me an example of what would be an appropriate industry, and I'd really love to understand in depth kind of how you would work with a person. Where is your data coming from? Are you scraping the universe? And how would you go about supporting someone in this scalable way on allocating across products or channels or customer segments?
Yeah, let me Let's explore a little bit our launch customer, which is a leading or the leading beauty retailer. And the allocation is a bit interesting there because instead of allocating dollars to customers, their big lever in marketing is actually giving away product samples that they get from their brands. And so they give away, hundreds of millions of these samples, and they do it through a series of different kinds of marketing programs. They do it through a points redemption program. They do it through coupon codes. They do it as a birthday gift. All kinds of ways you can get samples from them. And they do understand a bit about the effectiveness of what happens when they give away a sample, but they actually weren't doing anything with that data. And so what our objective was in working with them was to create a tool that would allow them to strategically allocate their product samples to the most appropriate programs so that they'd have the highest impact both on their customers buying more of their product, but also to the brands that's supplying the sample, increasing the ROI to the brands of the samples that they're giving out. And so we brought in all the result data at a SKU level of all the samples they'd given out. We brought in information about their programs, their different products. We allowed them to tag products so that we could correlate the type of products with the impact of the sample distribution. And basically, we built them at a brand slash category level, be an optimizer that would give them an optimal allocation of these product samples based on their strategic goals in a specific marketing program, whether they were cared more about the return back to themselves or the return back to the supplying brand. And they could, you think about strategic optimization. You can all think in terms of setting sliders with different weights and running scenarios to see the impact of how different emphasis on your different strategic criteria will impact the outcome. And that's what we've done for them, and generated 10 to 15% lift in terms of the return on those samples they give out, which is a very significant amount of improvement on a very high number of samples that they give out. So that's a special case example around where we've done implementation. More broadly on marketing allocation, where we're focused on is a kind of a product geography level. And so thinking through taking the data and understanding the differences by the product domain. We're doing this for a telco, by a product domain or how a product acts in a geography, what the different competitive nature of that geography product segment is, and then being able to allocate down to the channel level based on that. And so we take the data is actually some of the typical performance data that you would get from media mix modeling or marketing mix modeling tools that kind of gives you the impact of marketing spend that could range from anything from the conversions and sales from a coupon code or a 800 number to the Nielsen ratings and so forth. So pulling in all of that performance data and then correlating it back, but at the product or geography level, as opposed to trying to do it only at the channel level.
Yeah. Let me go back to the beauty retailer. So what your service is it something that now you've set something up for them, some software tool where your client is now kind of running this on an ongoing kind of continual basis so you don't have to have boots on the ground?
Yeah, exactly. In fact, we're a SaaS software company, and what's interesting about the technology that underlies this is it's our CTO is a guy who comes from the ETL software world. If you're familiar with that,
I'm not. What's that stand for?
It's basically about data transformations. So it's transforming and loading data, and so we have an engine that basically ingests data that the customer has. So we don't ask the customer to conform to our data model. We work on top of their data, and then everything is configurable to a specific customer. And so we actually have a single code base that serves any customer. And what that allows us to do is move very, very quickly. And the product to customer is a SaaS tool. And what's really, really important, as we found around any kind of transformational software, is that you can't just provide a better answer. You actually have to provide the workflow that makes people's lives easier. So in the beauty retailer example, they have a SaaS tool that they have 30 users on every day that are at one end of the process figuring out what the optimal allocation is, and at the other end of the process POs are getting spit out, because that's actually where you create the value, is writing the PO for the sample, not kind of upstream where you just made the decision. You have to make sure it flows all the way through. So we think of our business and our product as a combination of a business analytic decision tool, but also and scenario modeling, but also the workflow and the downstream connectivity to make sure that those decisions are turned into actions.
Okay, cool. So, like, what's the process for a client of setting up your tool? It sounds like a little bit complex. You have to kind of go and find all the data and figure out how to port it in there, and then figure out how to make some sense of it, and probably need some processes of who's looking at it, making decisions. So, do you have consultants that go in and help them with that, or how do you do that?
Well, we're a young company, so we we kind of do what it takes. What I would say is we have business knowledge, and we start with a design thinking workshop in which we take all the stakeholders and bring them together to understand sort of the ideal process, both in terms of workflow and pain points, but also in terms of the decision. So what are the criteria? And then as we think about the decision criteria, there's two important concepts in these decisions. One's the criteria you're using to make it. So, what's the outcomes I'm trying to generate? And the second one is the constraints, because, for example, in the beauty retailer example, if I gave all of my sample quantity to a single brand out of their 300 brands, that wouldn't be a feasible solution. That brand couldn't produce that many samples, and it would, the other brands would reject and so forth. And so there's a set of constraints that you have to layer on top of a decision to make sure that outcome is actually executable. And that's actually generated fairly quickly. And what we can do is go in, have the discussion around that topic, and then actually, before we go and design anything, just understand the data and understand the value in that data. One of the, I think, the core ethos of consulting that is often missing in the enterprise software world is this is two things I would say. One is a focus on value, and the second is a determination that you're going to do whatever it takes to make that customer's problem go away, no matter what that means. And we kind of hold true to both of those in that sort of consulting ethos at SnapStrat. And so we'll work with the customer to figure out the right way to do it. What I'd say is there's often a lot of bigger issues around process change and ensuring, and even maybe figuring out what those right criteria are. That's not our business, and that's where we want to work with consultants, is to make sure that, in fact, this customer is set up for success around this decision, and they're going to make the right process changes, that they have the right strategy in place, and so forth. And so there's a certain set of services we provide, not only just once, but on an ongoing basis as part of our SaaS agreement, which is things like retuning the model and making sure that the data flows in consistently, and that we can reflect changes in their business and in the tool. But the broader set of change requirements for the organization itself is not something that we do, but rather partner with others to do.
That's fascinating. So one kind of use case for would be around figuring out how to allocate a certain amount of resources or allocate some kind of activity. What are some other types of things that this sort of decision tool can be used for? I think you mentioned.
So yeah, I can go through a few examples where we've had discussions on it. One interesting one is if you think about a physical network of retail stores, and which stores I should close and which stores I should remodel. The value in thinking through that in a systematic way, and it's typically there's a budget for that, and it's in this class of what we call recurring strategic decisions. There's a strategy behind it. It's multi-criteria, and we love multi-criteria decisions, particularly ones with both qualitative and quantitative inputs. And there's a lot of value at stake in making that decision. So that's an interesting one. We've looked at things like labor rate optimization, where where there's a whole set of trade-offs between service levels to customers, retention, seniority of employee, and so forth. We've looked at similarly, we've looked at the staffing levels, because staffing levels have another. Again, it's a set of trade-offs, right? It's a cost trade-off versus a service level. And there's things like customer. How much do I care about customer retention or basket size versus the cost of operations, and it's different depending on the nature of the store. What there's certain categories that want a minimum number of people in. So we looked at that. We're having a
how would that labor rate optimization kind of work?
So labor rate optimization, what you need to be able to do is look historically at it really becomes it's really an HR question, right? So you're looking historically at swings in retention, at swings in the it could be, depending on the nature of that employee. If they're customer facing, it can be a store level NPS. You could look at their kind of the employee record in terms of their how well they've done in their job. You can look at number of applicants and the quality of applicants you're getting into the funnel. So it's one of these things that you have a lot of different kind of diverse criteria, and it's again something kind of we're built around that can all impact that decision, and understanding those correlations to get to a sweet spot. And it might be different by stores. There may be certain stores where you have a certain demographic that has a different need. There are different puts a different weighting on service level, another one that puts a different weighting on price, and you want to be able to refine that decision at a level where you can be strategic at a store level. It would hold with other kinds of activities like customer service as well.
So this would be, then you would set up this, in the first case of the beauty retailer, you'd set up this tool as a SaaS tool, and client would continue to use it over time to continue as market conditions change. They would keep referring to the tool to update their, sample mix, or in this case, every quarter or on whatever periodicity as they're updating their wage that they're going to offer, they would refer to the tool. It's like an ongoing piece of their infrastructure as opposed to a one-time consulting project.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what I mean about sustainability, right? Because inevitably these decisions are being made more and more often because the business context is changing faster and faster. And it's core to what we're trying to do that we not only give them if in fact we just gave them a one-time solution, we're effectively technology-enabled consultants, but we're actually providing technology solutions that sustain and can transform an organization to be better at this category of decision, not just once, but over time.
And it seems like it's these recurring strategic decisions that have multiple criteria. This is fascinating. Tell me a few other of these kind of use cases. We talked about labor rates, talked about allocating marketing budget. What are some other places where these recurring strategic decisions happen?
So one of the easy ways to think about is to start to go sort of at an intersection. Sometimes a lot of them are cross industry, some of them are industry specific, but an industry sort of function perspective. So one we're just talking. We were this week down at one of the movie studios. We had a couple of different discussions there that were really interesting. One of them was about one of the studio's interactive platforms. So that's a subscription model. And their question is, what's the right strategy around offers to be able to kind of optimize the value of the subscription platform? And if you think about offer management, it's been, again, typically we see this in kind of the vast majority of the decisions. If there's tools, they're way down at the detailed level. So there'll be offer management that helps me understand for a specific what's the right pricing of a specific offer for that I'm going to make to a specific customer set. They were interested in a very different question, which is what are the right group of offers and what should be my strategy in terms of things like uh, discounting for new customers and how that might hurt retention of existing customers versus retention offers versus increasing promotional spend, those kinds of trade-offs on a fixed platform. So sort of the investment in various levers that will impact customer revenue on an interactive platform. So that's one we were looking at. We had another with another studio actually had a very different conversation, which is an example of an industry specific one. There we were talking about licensing windows. And so as it turns out, if you in the media and entertainment business, as you take a film and you go through its life cycle, it will get distributed across different means of distribution, from ranging from theater to online and various permutations, but also there's a whole geographic component to that. And the way that and timing of those distribution windows by geography is complex, and it has a lot of benefit to getting it done right. And there's factors you wouldn't even think of, like depending on the demand in a specific country, if you wait too long to distribute into that country, online, you risk a higher amount of piracy. But if you do it too early, you lose all the higher margin theater revenue and so on and so forth. And so that's another one we were looking at that's kind of very special purpose. So it ranges pretty broadly. There's you can think about supply chain and optimizing my DC network in supply chain is another problem that's highly strategic. And most of the tools are around, sort of shelf space optimization, not really thinking through, which is now very fluid. How many DCs do I want to build? What 3PL should I use to, augment that space? And what cities? How do I manage the value of having a centralized network versus having a distributed one where I can get more same day or next day service out to my customers and so forth? You can sort of see you can take any function and think about the core strategic decisions that function makes and apply this kind of tool. And in general, you'll find that those decisions today are being made in either spreadsheets or in meeting rooms for the most part, or in big kind of one-off efforts with a business analytic team that isn't repeatable for that customer, and yet they're having to make these decisions more and more often.
Wow, sure. I imagine you pay attention to what other folks in the industry are doing, that's similar to what you are. What do you see kind of the big consulting firms, the McKinsey, Bain, BCG, so forth, doing around kind of building this kind of software tools that can kind of be the leave behind kind of that can continue to generate revenue for the firm over time? What do you see those firms doing that is somewhat analogous or competitive to your product?
Well, it's a huge challenge, for those firms, and I've talked to all of those firms around around partnering, and I'm sure we will at some point. I think that the MBB for sure recognizes that the product has to change. I think what's a little less clear is what their role in that sort of the new consulting value chain is. The challenge, and so I think about the large consulting firms and frankly small ones and individuals much more as partners than competitors. They are building a lot of prototyping capabilities, and I think in some cases McKinsey probably further ahead than others are buying firms that particularly around that have data. And then sometimes have some kind of capabilities around software. But the challenge with software in a consulting firm is that software is a capital intensive business where you're building a platform that you're going to invest in over time, and it just has very, very different economics than a consulting firm and very different skill set. And so I think what you'll see is a lot of partnerships. You'll see some for the very high velocity kinds of tooling, particularly tooling that the software, the consulting case teams are going to be able to use. That you'll see may invest in their own proprietary software, but for the sort of the multitude of decision making, there are increasing number of partnerships that that the consulting firms used to avoid. With in the name of objectivity, they're realizing that they actually now need those partnerships to be able to quickly build capability in their customers. So I think I think it's still shaking out. There's certainly developers in all the firms now, but they're also being much more aggressive about finding the right partners to offer differentiated solutions to this just wide diversity of challenges that their clients face in this space that frankly there are very poor software solutions today.
What does it look like for a client to use a product like yours in terms of what's the engagement look like? You mentioned that you'd start with some design thinking and some workshops. So it sounds like your tool is kind of very much multi-purpose. We talked about supply chain and which stores should we close and marketing spend. So really quite a multi-purpose software. So what does a client have to do to customize it for their particular data needs and decision needs?
So so there's kind of two stages to an engagement, which is one is what you talked about, sort of the problem definition. So the problem definition is the design thinking and making sure there's value in the data, understanding how we're going to derive the correlations. And then at least, for the foreseeable future, we do the lifting on configuration at our end. And so what we do is once we understand the workflow and the screen flow, we build out the screens. Which is a configuration exercise, but it's non-trivial. And so typically the first month is the let's make sure there's value in the data. Let's make sure that we understand the right focus to make sure that we get that data value as quickly as possible. Typically after the first month, we'll come back with a kind of a dashboard view of the data. And then in the subsequent, probably 2 months, we kind of build the app that we discussed. And depending on the scope, there may be multiple phases of that app. But for kind of a think about it as sort of a 3-month end to end, will get you to a app that delivers value around one of these decisions. And depending on sort of how comprehensive and where you want the workflow to go, you may decide that no, we want 2 or 3 what I call releases or phases of that to extend across the end-to-end workflow of that specific decision. And then there may be antecedent decisions or related decisions that kind of share data that then they decide we want to take advantage of the fact that you already have our data on, let's say campaign performance. We really, beyond just the marketing allocation tool, we'd really like to understand something more around campaign optimization or whatever that thing is. But we want to be really fast. So we want to go from 0 to you're getting value out of this tool in a couple of months, but also in a way that feels very, very custom to our customers, because it's their strategy. And I know that there's a lot of in software avoiding calling customers unique, but in the intersection of industry strategy, decision, and workflow, no one looks like anyone else. And our goal is not to force a customer onto change their workflow and so forth for our platform, but rather the other way around, to make sure we configure our platform around how they want to work to make this as easy as possible to start to get value.
So you mentioned that decisions are currently being made with Excel spreadsheets or in a conference room. What are the sorts of changes internally to organization or roles or processes that clients should be thinking about if they're going to be adopting a tool like yours for recurring strategic decisions?
Let me start by answering that with an anecdote. from the beauty retailer example, because the CMO, we were given an update, and the CMO was sort of getting exposed to the tool for the first time, and this was when we were a few months into it, and in that tool, as I mentioned, there's a need to set some criteria that are going to impact sort of how samples are distributed. Is it more important to get value to our organization, more important to get value to the brand, or more important? And the third one might be average order volume, which matters for certain programs where you're putting in a coupon code, for example. And so someone has to set sliders to say, which of these is most important, and you can set sliders at a program level. You can set sliders at an enterprise level. So the CMO comes in the room and is kind of looking at this. She asks the question to the project lead, the head of brand marketing. So who gets to set those, and are those the right values? And that person froze because she hadn't really thought about this, because suddenly you're putting a very high-powered tool in the hands of an organization that is going to have major impact on outcomes depending on how it's set. And so the first answer to your question is really an organization has to really have a good handle on these decision rights and sort of the way the criteria and how those criteria are going to get weighted, and making decisions on that. And if you've made these decisions in meeting rooms or informally, or one person just kind of dictated it, that's a whole new practice. And then as you go downstream, you have to build the processes so that translates into how the people on the front lines, depending on the nature of the decision. Some decisions there is no front line, like maybe store remodels doesn't. Once you make a decision which store I'm going to remodel, it's kind of done. But for back to our beauty retailer, I have someone who's got to call the brand and ask for the samples, and if they kind of ignore all of the data science behind this and do whatever they want, I'm not going to get the value out of that whole ecosystem. And so it's both having the right criteria, the right decision rights model, and then the link to those decision rights and ensuring that the execution follows that. That's really important. And the tool can enable that and kind of tell you when it's not working, but it doesn't change organizations. It doesn't it doesn't change incentives. It doesn't change some basic workflows that may have to change in order to get this stuff adopted.
Take me inside the black box just a little bit in terms of data science. So I imagine it's not that you are kind of programming a specific algorithm out of your head, but is it one of these things where the machine is learning over time? And so tell me just a little bit about kind of the algorithm, how it's developed, and how the machine is taking the inputs and translating them into recommendations.
So first of all, there's and this is again a bit of a differentiator for us. There's two kinds of algorithms that are kind of in the broad realm of data science that we're leveraging. The first is predictive algorithms, which say that a criteria, let's say lift to a for a sample to a brand, I have to be able to predict and how that sample will perform in the future based on whatever historic data I have. And that's a very classic data science kind of multivariate regression problem. The specific algorithm may change. So we don't have a single black box algorithm. We'll have a library right now. We just custom build the algorithm based on the needs of the customer. It's actually a relatively small amount of the development, and make sure that kind of we have the right right regression model in place, and the type of modeling based on the specific problem. And then the second piece of data science is an optimizer, because you have once you understand what your predicted values are and you weight those predicted values, you need to then flow that through whatever kind of optimization model you're trying to build. Typically it's an allocation, but not always. And so that optimizer is a more of a special purpose piece of software that takes in all of the constraints and then produces the optimal allocation. What you mentioned is in terms of tuning is based on the kind of where technology is going on predictive models, which is to say that as I see the results from previous decisions, I tune my models to, continually improve my predictive capability over time. And that happens for two reasons, and it's important. And so that's happening in a more and more automated way. Though it's still, you still need kind of data scientists to tune those models, and that's part of our subscription model, is actually making sure those models get tuned. But in our world, where we're often, if you think about our decisions that are different than, say, what web page should I render to someone who's coming on my website, that's a very high velocity decision, because millions of people do that every day. Our decisions are low velocity decisions. As you pointed out, often it's every quarter. And I'm trying to take some downstream data and feed the back end decision. So that changes the nature of our science. And the second thing is, a lot of our criteria are things, because they've been done in spreadsheets for meetings, that have maybe been poorly measured in the past. So outcome of discretionary projects is something that people, at first, you might have a very qualitative measurement by going to interview 20 people, and we're fine with that. We'll take in that data and create that data just like we would a highly quantitative, very high end piece of data. But over time, you're going to be able to improve that, because you're going to begin to build this closed loop as you automate this decision making. You understand what the criteria were, you understand the outcome. And so in our world, those decisions, the sort of the curve of improvement of those decisions, will be very steep for customers, because their kind of data and decision hygiene is going to improve so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, the black box, as we think about it, is a white box. When we hear the objections of a lot of our customers to what they see in the marketplace, the issue that they face is that it's very hard to make this class of decisions if you don't understand the why. And so we open up our models and work with some firms. We're aligned with a professor out of MIT that we've been partnering with, who kind of focuses on these kind of white box predictive algorithms. Meaning, and what we mean by white box is, say, the reason we're recommending this course of action is because these factors influence it. So we know that, for example, for our beauty retailer, that the type of brand it is, if it's a modern brand versus a classic brand, has a big influence on kind of which programs it performs well. We want people to know that and know why we're recommending those things, and that tooling is now available. And so we think that's important in terms of the kinds of algorithms we're going to write. And it's, I think, very frustrating for a lot of organizations when they don't understand those correlations, because it doesn't help them do things like test and learn, because you don't really know why you're making the decisions you're making. So we avoid that kind of technology completely, and try and really have a very open kind of data science architecture that our customers can see inside.
Got it. How does a firm like yours, how do you do the business development side of kind of raising your visibility, getting inquiries from potential clients?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's probably, going from being a partner at Bain to starting a software company. It's much easier to sell a seven-figure consulting project than it is to sell even an initial assessment with an initial project with a software platform like ours. And so it's been exhilarating. It's hard, getting into the marketplace. Fortunately, where we've started over the last first couple of years is with my network, because connected in an awful lot of companies, and the alums of the various consulting firms I've been with have been very helpful. So initially it was, we started with networking, and now we're at the place where we've kind of gotten our launch customer into production. We got the platform, version 1 built out. We're now, kind of focused now, as the next stage of it is go to market. And we think of it as two things. The first is a couple of focused use cases, because you can't sell sort of in the market. You can't sell improved strategic decision making as a product. You have to sell marketing allocation or strategic planning or what have you as a product. So that kind of pushes us into new customer acquisition in some narrower spaces. But at the same time, I think, and more importantly, in the long term, is working with consultancies and individual consultants in bringing us a new set of capabilities to their clients and kind of fitting in with their products. And sometimes that'll be white label, sometimes it will be just a referral, and sometimes it'll be a partnership or something integrated into a notional product that a consultancy has. And we're doing that with boutique firms and larger ones. We're having those conversations, and I think that's where a lot of our business development effort will go. We're, as I mentioned, our customers almost by definition are going through some kind of transformation in the area they want this capability in, because we're not replacing the system that does something. We're creating a whole new capability. In almost every one of those cases, there are some kinds of consultancies involved with those types of transformations. So it's the sort of networking core focused products that we can go to market with in a specific use case, and then most importantly, working with channel partners. And it's not just consultancies; agencies are also another one we've had discussions with, particularly around the marketing space.
So, for any listener who might be interested a lot of listeners of the show are running boutique firms or independent consultants. So, for any listener that says, "Wow, that would be a great capability," and might be able to bring your firm into an opportunity, what's the best way for people to learn more about your firm or to reach out to you in particular to follow up?
Yeah, so we love having conversations, and we're young and hungry and eager to work with folks. So would love to hear from your listeners, and we're thrilled to have exploratory conversations that just educate both of us, because I find I learn an awful lot during these, and then and both with the consultancy and their clients. You can reach out to me directly, Jonathan at SnapStrat, SNAPStrat.com. Our website has a pretty good set of both use cases and more detail on what it is we do. And we can I think the best way is to find a customer and do a small pilot at, to test the concept, test the value, and take it from there. We'll be very responsive, and the advantage that we have is we understand your business. We understand how consultancies work. We understand business value, and so there's a lot of kind of the baseline conversation around understanding the mechanics of the business and the consultancy that we get off the bat, and it allows us to have a very rich conversation very quickly about, well, can we, because we have no desire to help one of your clients that we can't help, and if so, how, around a specific problem that they're facing. And it's we are not a product looking to find a solution. We're actually looking to apply our technology to where there's a felt need. And so it's something resonates and go, wow, I could really use something like this for client X on problem Y. That's a great conversation. And if it's not going to be a fit, we'll be the first to tell you.
Yeah. Now, you're a former Bain partner, and I think you were also at McKinsey as well. What could you give us just a snapshot of kind of what the rest of your team looks like? Is it several kind of management consultancy type folks, and then some programmers and data science people? Or tell us just a little bit about the team at SnapStrat.
Yeah, it's a very senior team. So our CTO has 30 plus years experience just in data engineering, which is the core of what these applications require. And So he brings he brings the capability to bring and build kind of enterprise class applications, which is critically important when you're dealing with the kind of customer set and the sensitivity of data that we're dealing with. We have folks from Chief Product Officer as a veteran of Dow and Apple and several startups, and then we've got sort of development talent and biz ops talent behind that. But it's pretty diverse in terms of both business and technology talent. I thought the one thing I felt as I took the leap from consulting into this business was if we could get the right team who both had the right team culture and the right ethos and the right dedication to just caring more about our customers, that we couldn't lose. And I'm thrilled with the team we have.
That's awesome. This has been a great conversation, Jonathan. I can imagine a lot of listeners might have opportunities where their clients have a need for something like this. So really excited to have you on the show. Thanks so much for taking time out to tell us about SnapStrat.
Thank you so much for making the time for me, and glad to have the conversation. Look forward to hearing and talking to some of your listeners.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Unleashed, the show that explores how to thrive as an independent professional. Unleashed is sponsored by Umbrex, the world's first global community of top-tier independent management consultants. The mission of Umbrex is to create opportunities for independent management consultants to meet, share lessons learned, and collaborate. I'd love to get your feedback and hear any questions that you'd like to see us answer on this show. You can email me at unleashed@umbrex.com. That's UMBREX.com. If you found anything on the show helpful, it would be a real gift if you would let a friend know about the show and take a minute to leave a review on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. And if you subscribe, our show will get delivered to your device every Monday. Our audio engineer is Dave Nelson. Our theme song was composed by Gary Negbauer, and I'm your host, Will Bachman. Thanks for listening.